welcome to this interview, which I'm having with a great guest here, who is Reverend Dr. Warren Lee Boyd. The title of the video is Beating the Babylonian System with Community Care. It speaks for itself, really, and what the Reverend is going to do is explain what a community care association is, what it is capable of, and how it can actually assist in influencing council decisions when it comes to some difficult situations, such as road closures or school closures or things of that nature, where we don't want to get into towns that have time limits in travel and that type of thing. A very influential position can be held in these community care groups or community care associations. It covers various different topics and also has his contact details as well, if anyone wants to investigate or research further how they can influence their councils by having these community care associations. So enjoy, get the information, fantastic information on legislation and how to use legislation to beat council policy.
Hi again, everybody. Thank you very much for coming and watching. I've got a good friend of mine on here. We have Reverend Dr. Warren Lee Boyd, who's come along to give us a bit more of an insight, as I had said before, about, well, many things. But first of all, the Community Care Association that I was talking about before, and how it can be used to influence and help councils, let's call it that, to make correct or better decisions when they're dealing with issues of the community. We'll crack on straight away. So welcome. And how are we doing today?
Hi, Peter. Good morning. We're doing good to see you again. Good to have a conversation with you anytime. And I think it's a very good Friday. As I used to say, it's Good Friday.
Always good on a Friday for whatever reasons, even if it's just the end of getting out of work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for bringing me on today. So the subject is basically a tool, a very powerful tool. And as I mentioned to you before, it's like trying to sell Kellogg's cornflakes. If you advertise it once, nobody buys. You've got to keep pushing it, and then it will click with them. This is that type of tool that does not work overnight. No effective tools do work overnight. It's a pragmatic process, what I'm going to reveal to people. It's incremental, and it's the knowledge I will give you first, and then I'll give you the strategy. And this will affect any concerns you've got from contract law, employment law. But basically what we're using is to go where we can have the biggest effect. It's not firefighting for individuals. Yes, it is in a way. We have to have an effect and influence on the people who make decisions that affect our life. And these are the people in the councils. How do you influence them? And what is the power behind what I'm going to show you, where you can actually say, well, we have the power, it's there. So this is what I like to reveal to the people who are watching today.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. I mean, just to go on the point where you're saying about the Kellogg cornflakes thing, I mean, we've met a few times, and I went down to your home down in Wales, in Llandudno. I mean, absolutely beautiful place. And funnily enough, the times that we have actually met, together, each time I get a sunburnt head because it's so sunny and nice. And but we've discussed this, quite in depth, over the last, whatever it would be, I can't remember, about a year and a half or something like that. And obviously little bits keep coming into me and settling in my brain. And, it doesn't always solidify and be able to come up with a tool to be used completely. But, it was just last week, and it was, you sent me the link on the message, with what you had done, talking to Richard Vobes, wasn't it? And that just kind of sort of clicked in the right place and joined all of my pieces together to think, do you know what, that's a fantastic tool that I had known about from your discussions and descriptions before, but, just kind of the light went on, light bulb moment, and it all fitted together perfectly. So that's really what you're talking about. And that's why I wanted to get you to come on and do another talk and push it out more to a different audience. And because this is the way we can get other people to hopefully listen, learn, and then take action.
Yes. And this is the second advert for Kellogg's Cornflakes in a way. Richard Vubbs and other people, but yourself. It means I can get the message over again to a different audience, maybe even the same audience. And the message, because I won't be saying the same things, of course, so there's a different way of saying things. And that may register with other people. For 3.5 years, this is what I've been professing, going to presentations, saying this is where you have to target, basically, our interest. Because if I can just find a list of what the councils are involved with, and maybe some people know, and some of you don't know, I'm just going to go through, see what we have here. The local authorities, they have control over education, health service, social care, i.e. care homes, transport and public transport, police, fire, ambulance, environment, ecology now, housing, sewage, solid waste, parks, utilities, and a very important one, if you're looking at the 20-minute stuff and the 20-mile-an-hour stuff and the 15-minute stuff, is the planning part of the local authority. So if we can have an influence, be like a steering committee on the local authority, we can have an influence on all these departments. And the way to do this is using these two tools. And I suppose if people are there, when they see this recorded, they can always go back to what I'm saying. But with pen and paper, you can write down the two important acts which will give you this power. It's called the Localism Act 2011. And if you're in Wales, the Wellbeing Act. Now, they are similar acts. And if you don't have a Wellbeing Act because you're in England or Ireland or Scotland, there's something similar there. It's also in Australia. It's actually called in Australia the Localism Act in Australia. Let me tell you basically what these two acts do. The Localism Act, well, it really quite neatly encourages the local authorities to engage with the local community. The word is community, not individual. The individual can represent the community, but they're positively empowered to engage with the local community. And the Wellbeing Act in Wales implies that council should be open to innovative ways by community groups to help mitigate damaging effects on businesses and domestic community. Now, just those two lines there can make you think what their responsibilities are and that you can influence them because it gives you the power. These two acts give you the power, the public the power. And I will show you how you can. I'll go into more details about this. It's quite big actually because we cover other topics that can come into this. So Peter, I'll continue then. So
yeah,
there's so much to do, and I'm in the process of I have a PowerPoint, and there's about 143 slides I made so far on these topics. So bear with me, because when they use these powers, local authority, they have to check the following pieces of law, legislation. They have to look at the relevant, would you believe it, European Union treaty obligations, directives, regulations, which apply to procurement and state-aided activity. They have to look at human rights law. They have to look at current UK legislation, judicial reviews, natural justice, and other relevant legislation to local authorities. They have to look at this. And so if they don't do that, they have a statutory obligation to look at many, many things before they put pen to paper and sign off something to commission it with your money. I'll go into more detail now on the Localism Act. So what I have here, I'll just read some things to you here. The Act also promotes community empowerment through various mechanisms, such as the community has the right to challenge. This provision allows voluntary organisations and parish councils to express an interest in running local services. It could be a bus service, for example. We know somebody in Wrexham is doing that. A marvellous lady who set up a local bus service in a council estate. A community right to bid. So it empowers a community, and this is the word community again, why I'm using that word community, because that's the empowering word. It entitles a community to nominate and bid for assets of the community that they have. Now, lots of councils will have archived properties that the local council own or the public body owns. So you can find out and bid for these. It could be pubs, it could be community centres, open spaces, i.e. land, and you can take control of these assets. Now, we know a lady in Crewe, they took control of a public building, been empty for a year. They paid £1 to the council. Yeah, they paid the electric and the gas, the utilities, and they turned that into a food hub. So the farmers who couldn't get the food to market, they brought it in the back of the building, and the front was a shop. And in that particular shop, for £5, you probably get about £25 worth of goods. You can influence, and these are not my opinions. This is taken from the acts, the legislation itself. Number 3, I'm trying to be concise. Very important one: neighbourhood planning. It gives the communities an opportunity to prepare their own plans for the area. And so you think of the restrictions that may happen that you don't like. This is where it's coming from. The planning, we need to affect that, and that's a big topic in itself. And there's lots we can do there. And also local referendums. Now, I know a councillor in this area here. He's 78 years old, very well respected, and he's so well connected. He can pick up a phone and have an influence. Now, he actually did and achieved and won a referendum because one council was not moving on one topic. He said, "Okay, right, I'll do another way on you," and he used a referendum, and it wasn't a big referendum. I don't know if at the moment, Peter, stop me if you've got any questions here, maybe that you've heard something that you want to explore more on.
Yeah. So the act, you're talking about part of the act on the neighbourhood planning. So I think this is going to be a very important issue for everybody, especially, in fact, you can't say the UK, it's everybody worldwide, really, isn't it? That is going to be affected by these things that are apparently being discussed. We know what they're trying to do in Oxford. If we were looking at a community group, now I think this is going to be the difference. Whereas if you have a community group that has people that can actually very gently and professionally and politely go into discussions with local councils about the neighbourhood planning, whatever it would be, but with reasonable sort of like discussions, rather than what we do see, which is like arguments and screaming and shouting, but using the acts and using the actual localism act and going in that the councils are responsible for planning, then I think that could actually have a major effect on assisting people in that.
The Wellbeing Act, I'll just go into that for people who live in North and South Wales, and maybe even New South Wales, okay? It does give you a power to engage and influence. These powers are enshrined in legislation. The Localism Act is 2011, but there have been additions to this, okay? And also the Wellbeing Act 2015. Now, I think some of these go back to 2006. And they have different sections in there. For example, on the Wellbeing Act, it introduces duty on local authorities to encourage local people to participate in decision-making with the purpose of promoting access to local government. Okay, it's a duty for councils to do this in this act. And section 44 to 50 states that they have a duty to promote and facilitate the involvement of community groups in the local authority's decisions. They are required, the local authority is required to consult and collaborate with community groups and local people. Must provide opportunities for organisations to express their views. Okay, and they should also report how local people, the outcomes of their involvement. Now, you need to be careful on that one because they could be selective. This is why a community care group, as a group, will actually be able to give you the outcome of the involvement, not just coming from the council, but coming from the group. An important thing to notice, which I'll come to later, maybe you can explain more about unincorporated associations. That will come in with a community care group. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a moment now. Why is this important? Because for 3.5 years, I've done a lot. I started talking about affecting the local authority because, as I said before, it controls so much. But individuals also need help. So I do that daily, like you do, Peter. But this is a big one. And so I've been working on this. And the principle of this is, to start it, you need to get a community care group. And the key words are community care. Here, you could have an Anglesey community care group. We've got one near Chester. We've got one in Leeds being set up. I'll be over there soon in a few weeks to speak about it with local groups. We had one in Bangor set up and one in South Wales. But the key words are community care. Why? Is because if you are challenged, the word care, I've got a community care. We care about the integrity of our community. So you can't be shot down for that. And if you question any further, you say, well, the Localism Act and the Wellbeing Act, if you're in Wales, encourages us, enables us to use these acts to form a community care group where we want to have influence. All we're using are these pieces of legislation to benefit the community. And the key thing about this is, when you set up this community group, all you need to do is on Facebook, a page or two on a Facebook, and you can, if you want a website for free, you go to MailChimp. MailChimp, I've got one on MailChimp, and you can have a look at this now. If you look at the Llandudno Community Care Association on Facebook, if you scroll down there, you'll see a link for a MailChimp webpage that I've done. And actually, that explains what I'm going to tell you now. So the way you start, if you need to have an influence. So this is the mantra. The mantra is engage, build relationships, and influence. It's like a counter. If you're a military guy, it's a counter-insurgency way of doing things. Okay. And this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do it humbly, quietly, with respect, using the legislation to back us, because you can't be challenged on legislation. You can be challenged on opinions. When you start using opinions or policies, they will challenge your policy, your opinion, because a policy is an opinion. But legislation is legislation. So this is why it's powerful, but you have to be determined and follow it through. Okay. So the way you do this, if you want to start, you just at your computer, you start with one issue. You think of the issue. And the issue I chose, you could choose food, but the one I chose is the high cost of utility bills. And here in Llandudno, when I drove down the promenade at Christmas time, normally all the hotels are open. This is a 365-day-a-year hospitality place. This is how it survives. The integrity of this community depends on the businesses here. Now, it never used to be back in the 60s, 70s. They used to have a lot of industry in places like Mocktra behind Llandudno. But so I noticed 40% of the hotels were closed. When I was in the gym in January, one guy who owns a hotel, he said, Warren, I used to pay £8,000 a month on utility cost. I am now paying £40,000 a month. It is unsustainable. I was told similar yesterday by somebody else near Chester. I was in Shotton in Wales, and somebody told me something similar. It went up to £20,000 a month. He had a shock when he opened the letter, £20,000 a month. So you pick a subject that everybody's going to agree with you, domestics or business. But where you start in the business community, because that actually scales down to the domestic community. If they have to close down because of high cost of utilities, I know quite a few people here, 5 big hotels are quietly on the market. They won't tell you I know who it is. And these people, they employ 200 people. That's 200 families. That could be 600, 700, 800 people that they're going to affect by closing down one. And there is one here being closed down a year now, the Queen's Hotel on the front. We don't know what's happening to that. So you choose one subject to get everybody on your side. Why? If they can't pay the bills, the assets, then there's no work for the hotel staff, the reception, the room cleaners, no work for the coach drivers, okay, because people can't afford to come here. And there's no work for training students and the children at weekend, the kids, the school kids who work in these cafes, work in these restaurants, work in these hotels on a Saturday and Sunday. There's no opportunity for them. So basically, it really is a struggle for the domestics. We have to take care to start with the business. And you make a leaflet, and I can give you the leaflet, Peter, and you can put it on your website. You can make a leaflet on the high cost of this, and you put down bullet points, how it affects the community. Shall I show you that leaflet now? Or, can I go through the leaflet with you now to give people the idea? So I call it the Llandudno Community Care Association, LCCA.
Do you want to share it on your screen?
Oh, can I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Hang on.
Okay.
All participants. There you go. You should be able to share it now. Just go to the share button at the bottom.
There we are. Share. So can you see that, Peter, now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I there's a photograph there. I should have took that photograph myself, but I didn't because I can't fly that high anyway. Bring the lights back on. So some punchline. Hotels and businesses are closing, extreme, and they were extreme 3.5 times for some businesses and domestics. So they're a quote that £8,000 to £40,000 a month. And they're a quote that it's a holiday venue all year round. And, you know, the previous Christmas, January, coaches were still arriving, but it was dead here. And all the hotels and the cafes I went to with this leaflet, I gave them this, the first part in the first box here. I said, can you read that and tell me if you agree? And not one of them denied it. They said, yeah, no work for hotel managers, no work waiters and waitresses, no work for chefs. I'm reading this out, Peter, because somebody might be listening in the car or, you know, doing something and they can listen to this.
Yeah.
No work for delivery or coach drivers, no work for housekeepers, no work for maintenance or trade people, plumbers, etc. No opportunities for hospitality training. And there are many colleges that do this. No opportunities for students and no weekend work for your children. Now, so think of the impact this situation has on you and your family. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is these two acts I've been talking about, because the council have to respond to this. And you don't use this as a bullying technique. You just have to know that these exist. They have statutory obligations to respond to this. So this is how I started. You make a leaflet like this. You can do it with food if you wish. But, you know, I always say start with the businesses because MPs and councils will listen to the businesses. If the businesses are closing, that's a worrying time. So nobody can deny this one. You could use this in your area. They are talking about putting the cost of the utility bills up again, you know. So please, if people want to use something like this, they're welcome to. Then what do you do then? You go knocking on doors. You don't need many. I've got more now. I've got about 40 people on board. But when I first started, I had about 15. Everybody who went to, yes, we want to sign up for this. When I say sign up, I just need your moral support.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't need any money because it doesn't work if you're taking money for this. It's not a business. This is the second law that Jesus gave, basically. Love thy brother. We're networking. If you do the modern day analogy, we are networking to survive. That's how Babylon will be overcome. Okay, later on. So what this does, it's very positive. This is community stuff. You're caring for community. Right, I'm just reading the leaflet here. I can switch that off. I don't need to share it. But when I went to all these hotels, they all signed up for this. There's no money taking part, otherwise it doesn't work. And we have to do this type of thing. Now, what happened a week or so later? The local political party emailed me, oh, we believe you've got a community care association. Yes, I have. But why is that? Because they heard I've been to the hotels, you see. And I said, because in 2006 and 2011, your political party brought in these two particular acts, the Wellbeing Act and the Localism Act. And what all I've done really is to utilize the power of those acts to try and help the community. Okay, so that was the first question. A couple of days later, oh, by the way, is this an unincorporated association? So what I do there, you see how I responded to them. I said, you gave us the opportunity to use the legislation. That's all I'm doing. I didn't invent this. You invented it. I'm using it. So they come back wanting to know more. Is it an unincorporated association? So what I did, I just copied and pasted off the government website the words, what they give you about a definition of unincorporated association. I said, by the way, there's no contractual agreement between any of us here. We just have a common goal to help people. So that's the way I answer, because you will be questioned by councillors or politicians when you start to do something. So you do.
What was it you said there? There's no contractual agreement between.
Yes. So I copied and pasted. You go on the government website. You type in. You're looking for a definition. Unincorporated association.gov.uk, and they will give you a definition of what that is. Companies House will do the same, by the way. Yeah. So you want to use references when I do legislation, employment law, contract law. When I'm preparing for a tribunal or a disciplinary, I'll use references. Okay, because it's not my opinion. So what I say to them when they ask, is it an unincorporated association? I give them a copy and paste that, and the last line I put on there is my own. I'll just say there's no contractual obligation between any of the participants in this association. We just we recognise a common value to help people. So nobody is committed, because on a PMA, for example, private members association, you can also be liable. Everybody can be liable, but there's nothing to be liable about here. We're just saying, let's have a talk about this. What can we do?
Yeah.
Now, the power of this, then, it started to work, because I have a phone call then from the landowner of Llandudno, is a big estate management company, been going for 150 years. They phoned me. I went to see them one-to-one. I saw the director of business development. He said, I don't hear about any problems our hotels have got or our cafes. And I held up this sheet of paper with all these people on there. I said, this is confidential, but I said, you recognize all these names on that Excel spreadsheet? Yeah, I do. I said, well, they say there's a problem. They don't want to lay off staff. Utility bills are so high. So they do recognize a problem. Anyway, he went away. 2 weeks later, the local political party emailed me, Warren, you would like to know, at a big hotel, there's a special meeting, all-day meeting, 2 sessions, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. And that organization that basically owns all the land here have organized it for the hospitality companies to come together and talk about the high cost, how they can mitigate it. So it did have an effect then. And they all came, including the MPs to that meeting and councillors and the hotel owners, and there's lots around here. It was a well-established meeting. However, they didn't address the options available to bring down the utilities. They came in with, there was one item they used was modifying the voltage peaks by using electronics. Okay, that's helpful. But the problem was, a few weeks later, the utility companies put the power prices up by 30%. So what you save with trying to reduce power or modify it or optimize it, how can you control it when the supply is fluctuating like that? You can't. Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't stop there. The Conservative MP for the area, he knew what I was doing, and they obviously informed him. He kindly took this to the House of the Parliament, to the Treasury, not just on behalf of the hospitality industry here in North Wales. He did it for the whole of the UK. He said, we have a serious concern here. Our hospitality industry is under threat due to excessive high energy bills. I don't think he used those words, but he was asking for a sensible energy plan for the whole of the hospitality industry. Within 3 months of myself launching this, with this group around me who are too busy really running the hotels, I did I can do the donkey work, I don't mind, but you've got this team behind you. You're empowered by a team who are with you, and anybody asked them, they said, yeah, we're concerned, but we're too busy running the hotel. So it got to the House of the Parliament within 3 months. Now I need to check up on how it's progressing now, how those talks are going on, but we mustn't stop there. We have another meeting planned later this month, and we have about 8 different options to talk about how to control the cost of utilities. So you see, Peter, it's incremental. We're using one subject on one subject only for the time being. I will tell you what we can do after we establish. This is engagement, by the way. Engagement, building a relationship up with the right people, and then having an influence. So that captivates what I'm saying, really.
So I think the big thing that comes across there, to me, for sure, is literally the relationship building part, though. So I think the idea of what you've said is absolutely perfect. You're using one subject You're not going in with a shotgun and spreading it out and then confusing the issue. Go in on that one subject, which you've chosen, the utility bills, which obviously everybody is involved with. Everybody's concerned about, businesses as well as the public. But once you've gone in there and you're talking, obviously your personality will come across and your sincerity will come across, and see that is a community care, because we care about the community. That's what we're doing here, nothing more. There's no financial gain. There's no political kind of like, sidelines. You're just there for the community, and you're showing them that. But like I say, you're actually building up that relationship with now what you've told us, not only councillors, but MPs as well as local landowners. I mean, that's some powerful influence that you have there.
Well, believe me, I know them one-to-one now, because from that basis, you get introduced to various, I know quite a few MPs face-to-face now. I have the telephone numbers. I won't use their telephone numbers unless it's an emergency. I envisage a scenario, maybe in the future, where something's happening in our community and I can pick the phone up. I've got a one-to-one, like a hotline support. Can you help? Got somebody down here, can't get access to food. The electricity's gone off. They're freezing cold. Can you please help? So it's not about me. It's not about being selfish, because if we look after other people, we will get looked after anyway, as you know, by the work you do. And that's what it's about, these communities. And all, by the way, many of these councillors are very positive. They want to help in a charitable way. They want to help the community. I mean, the politicians, they want to innocently help, I believe. How it goes in their future career, I don't know. But there's goodness in everybody, and that's what we're looking for. I'm not politically motivated. I was years ago, but then I woke up. What I'm looking for in these people in power, how can you help? That's what I'm looking for. And I will go. I will say, I offer my services. What can I do to help you achieve what you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's pointless trying to be political and decide what color tie you want to put on. Yeah. Let them get on with that, and don't care what color tie you've got on, as long as they've got a positive attitude and can actually assist the community. So, I mean, in here, the thing we're talking about is utility bills, which is on everybody's mind. I mean, it is a great issue to try and get the community together with. But then, once you've got the established relationship like what you have, so when it comes down to the next issue, you can kind of like ease the next issue in, rather than going in totally cold again, and just say that it's like say a more contentious issue, like, well, we're going to stop traffic in this road and divert it all to another part of the town so that we stop, whatever it is, that this ULEZ stuff that they tried to talk about and all of that. That's also going to assist you, do you think, to be able to help it influence in those decisions?
Oh, yes. It's fascinating. The knowledge that I've gained over the 3.5 years of jumping in the deep end, setting up the Workers of Wales Union and the Workers of Scotland Union, going in the deep end with legislation. Now, I'm not aware of legislation, employment or contract law. I write contracts for overseas companies. I've been a cost contract manager in Saudi Arabia. I studied law at Solihull College. I used to look at contract law when I was at Rolls-Royce in the evening. They did some marvelous courses there. When I did my calculations on jet engines in the evening, I was greedy. I would go and do a free course on how to write a contract. And that's how it started, because I was working for myself. I have to have a knowledge of employment law, contract law. And what I like about it is the intellectual challenge, how to win, or how to win without going to court. So basically, that's a strategy. How do you win without going to court? And it's a mind game in a way. And I like that mind game. Now, I'll go to the gym and have a workout. That's a physical game. And but to win what we're trying to achieve on these subjects you're talking about, let me just see. I've got some notes here, if you don't mind me referring to them, because I need to be concise, because I know you haven't got long here. But planning, for example, there are special legislation on the planning acts, and you can have an influence, like I say, with a community group beginning when they start doing things. If you're too late, there's ways to oppose it. For example, they have to consider, it's called material considerations. and that determines the plan. Some of the other considerations are that it has no harmful impact upon the environment. Okay, that environment word turns up here, and that's something you can use. Okay, you twist it around and use it to have an influence. It doesn't generate any traffic. These are questions that you can bring up, that you need to live there because, for example, there's nowhere else you could afford to live. These are relevant subjects to talk about. That Article 8 of the Human Rights Act entitles you to respect for your home. Local authorities, they have rules as when a decision can be delegated. So you can question who you're delegating this decision to. Why? What's the justification? Okay. You can raise objections from the parish council or the committee or the community care group, because they have to recognise, as I said before, the Localism Act, the Wellbeing Act, and they do know about it, even though they don't advertise it on television. Here in Wales, they have actually a section in the council called the Wellbeing section. I met a few of their members at an informal coffee, and they told me what they did. I've got the telephone numbers. So you see, I'm building an engagement. I bought the coffees. That was a cheap engagement for me. And they want to tell you, they want to tell you what we do. There's an ego here, a professional ego. This is what we do. And these people, they help people who are disabled, for example. They take people on walks and things like that. They're doing many good things. Okay. These are innocent people like you and me, but it's the agenda which we need to influence, don't we? Okay. There's a whole lot on planning. Section 78, you can make an appeal to the Secretary of State, for example. Don't forget, you need to get your evidence. So you can do traffic counting from a civil engineering point of view. You can go to a court of appeal, House of Lords, European Court. Development may not have taken place with planning permission. They may just stuck these things up. And now that's where we can go into the risk assessment. I'll tell you about that in a moment. There can be a breach of planning control. So we need people. We need those ex-planning engineers, planning people who've been in the councils to come forward and help us construct a little booklet on planning, on how to oppose it or influence it or change it. Okay, these are big subjects. I mean, I've got the headlines for these things. So if I sat down, I could start planning a strategy out where we can influence. But I'm just giving you the top headlines here. There are enforcement notices. You can appeal against refusal of planning permission, maybe vice versa. You can appeal against what they've done, what they plan to do. So there's also the Town and Country Planning Act, 1995, which explains what you're allowed to do without applying for planning permission. Okay, so I've got a lot of data on this, and what I was trying to do eventually is make it more concise. Okay. Like a roadmap, what you can do. So let's go into what the councillors have liabilities for. This is interesting now. It's not just the Localism Act. And by the way, use this knowledge in a careful manner. People who want to use this, it's got to be done carefully, humbly. It hasn't got to be pushing people's faces, for example, until you have to, unfortunately. If a council is doing something, they have to do things. They have a statutory obligation to conduct their work in certain ways. They have to conduct their ways, what they do, under an insurance, the constraints of an insurance, a public liability insurance. For example, if they're in public power, there's an offence here called misfeasance in public office. It's a remedy for harm caused by acts or omissions, things that the council have not done or have done. If they're obliged to do it or they've omitted to do it, and it breaches, that would breach the public liability insurance. Or if the councillor knew, or it's not just the councillor, people working in the council knew that they were abusing their public power or authority, or was reckless, indifferent to the limits upon their public power. And it does happen. We've seen cases in the paper. And it's to do with also probability of harming. This is where risk assessment comes in. Now, what I'm trying to do is give you an overview that they're not impervious in office. Some people think they are. This public liability insurance is very, very good, because and I've looked at this on many occasions over 3.5 years with the schools, They get indemnified, but it's like having car insurance. There are exclusions. You're not insured if you drive on the pavement, for example. Use that as a motorway. You know what I mean? These are exclusions. They incur a personal liability. In other words, the insurance will not insure them. They will incur this liability if they have to defend themselves in court, where allegations are made that they acted outside their powers of authority, they acted in bad faith, misrepresentation, fraudulently, or out of malice. Their actions can constitute a criminal offence, and if they made a defamatory statement. And that's just a few things. If they appoint their buddies on a council project and the buddies, their friends get paid, that's questionable. If they fail to comply with the members' code of conduct, there's a code of conduct in the council. And this legislation came out in 2004. The indemnity, the public liability insurance, will not cover the defence of any criminal proceedings. It will not cover any civil liability arising as a consequence of any action or failure to act which constitutes a criminal offence. In other words, and the insurance people have told me this, how can we insure something which is criminal? We can only insure something which is legal. Okay, that's what the insurance will say to you. Now, if the councils are doing something without due diligence, financial due diligence, which they have to, and they have statutory obligations they have to make sure is correct. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If they close the car park, and I know there's quite a few car parks closed, and people are going down to the beach or they're walking, what happens to that car park? They've closed the car park, the cars start to park on the main road. Now they start presenting an obstacle, a hazard. Mm-hmm. Any health and safety expert will say they'll come around your company. The first thing they do, they identify hazards, and then a risk, and then you do a risk assessment. Okay, insurances, by the way, work on risk assessments to work out a premium for you. If you're a high-risk driver, your premium is going to be very high. Okay, and they'll tell you, because they've told me, we base our premiums on risk. So the example I was telling you about, if you have a car on the main road now, or cars on the main road, people will put it halfway on the pavement, for example, it's blocking the traffic flow, there's a hazard. Okay, what about a hazard to the pedestrians? They have to cross the road now or walk around the car. So they haven't identified a hazard, and therefore they haven't done a risk assessment. Now, that councillor who said close the car parks, they'll send the van round with men and they'll put bollards there, seal it off. That's probably, would you believe, £5,000 to do that, okay, to maintain that closure. But then you would say to them, well, why have you done that? You should close the car park. So you ask the question, point me to the legislation which says that you should close the car park. Okay, now if they do successfully point into the legislation, there'll be exclusions in there, and there'll be other cases where they don't have to do this. They're not obliged to do this. But if they feel they have been obliged and they haven't followed that legislation, but the other thing they haven't followed is, have you done a risk assessment? What do you mean? Well, the cars, I've got photographs, the cars are on the road here now. Where's your risk assessment? Well, we haven't done one. Well, why not? There's a risk. So now the 1999 Management Health and Safety Act actually says that they should do a risk assessment. And if they don't do one, it's a criminal offence. So you can say to that person, well, you've breached the 1999 Health and Safety Act. You haven't done a risk assessment. Okay, so, and it costs, well, how much does it cost to close that? Cost £5,000. Now, if you haven't done a risk assessment, you're not insured. Now, your insurance company will not insure you now. And therefore, there's a potential criminal act here. If we want to pursue it, you'll have to pay for your own defence. That's whatever that's going to cost. However, how many car parks did you close? You closed 10. That's £50,000. I'll tell you what, maybe we won't pursue the health and safety breach, the criminal act. What we would like you to do is compensate, put the money back into the public purse, £50,000. Now, that is when they accept their responsibility and liability. Before that, they hide behind their policy. The Health and Safety Act, the breach of that, the risk assessment breach, makes them personally liable and criminally liable. Okay. Now, if they, but you're trying to do not a deal, you're trying to say, well, put the money back into the public purse, we'll forget about it. Okay, because that's the remedy. But if it went further, you don't need to go to court. If you actually say we have the evidence and we're willing to take this further down the line. Our community care group has got some funding to do this. We can start with a small claims court, for example. I think that's another strategy. If we say the allegation will get out, they've committed a criminal offence, and that will spread. You don't need to spread it for them. It will spread. And they are waiting for documentation from the courts that they could be taken to court. That's a worrying experience. It can take a year to go to court, or half a year.
But so this is one of the things that really sort of like piqued my interest, was knowing that it's actually with the health and safety, because usually it's used against us, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, so it's kind of flipping it on its head and saying, well, we're using that against you, not in a malicious way. We just want you to do your job. That's all.
Yep.
So if it's a criminal offense because you haven't done the risk assessment, and then obviously they're going to start like being resistant and not wanting to be shown that they were wrong. It's just human nature as well, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, I don't want to admit I've made the mistake, you know, generally anyway. But I mean, we could easily say, well, look, we don't want to cause, you know, major upset or court cases or anything like that. But you have to remedy it. And even if it was a case of, look, now we need all these car parks back open again, if that was, you know, the example you gave. And then if there was any resistance, and you could say something like, we would hate it to get out to the newspapers that you've actually allegedly or potentially committed a criminal offence and you're hiding behind the council.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you could easily speak to you know, the local newspaper, or even Facebook puts a post out there, it would spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
You know, that's certainly going to be something that's going to worry them. Again, you know, no smoke without fire type of thing, you know.
It's a financial impact. I'll tell you something. The financial impact can be quite high because they know their insurance does not cover them anymore. They have to pay for a court case, their own legal fees. And if they lose, they have to pay the other side. So basically, because of that omission in statutory obligation on financial due diligence and legislation due diligence, they are prone personally now. They can't hide behind the banner of the council. And the other thing about it is, if this was a head teacher, for example, imposing certain medical interventions on the children, okay, if they haven't done a risk assessment, they're not insured. Again, they're personally liable. Now, there's a criminal offence there. And when you make it known to them that because they haven't complied with legislation, and this is not your opinion or my opinion, the legislation says this, all I'm telling you now for your own career, if you breach this legislation, I don't know, with a criminal conviction or even the hint of one, it could affect your career. You may never work with children again. And how old are you? In the middle of your career? You may never work again. Because how are you going to get a police clearance to work with children? And even if you do, people would be talking about you imposing certain things on children. And that's a very sensitive issue. So what you're trying to do is help them because they're hiding behind the policy. Their policies can harm them if they don't respect the legislation, what we have to do. That's how you influence. If you go in there with your opinion, you've got no chance. Opinion, your policy, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So just like on a personal level, through experience, if we are looking at, say, because it was health and safety was what the councils used to close down businesses, like gyms, my gym, for instance, so it's a risk. So, you know, we're closing all of the gyms down. Now, I would guarantee they've never done any risk assessment whatsoever for that. I mean, do you think that would actually come into play there? I can't remember the title of the actual worker that contacted us, and it was like, you know, we're going to use health and safety against you. We're going to get prohibition orders against you if you don't close. You know, unfortunately, it was just all a shock at the time, but it would have been good to flip on his head and say, well, can you show me a copy of the risk assessment?
Well, yes. Look what the gym in Wigan, I forget his name now. He's got a similar gym to what you had, a boxing martial arts gym. He was an MMA champion in 1995. Kevin's gym. Look what they did to him. They came on in full whack. Now we have a gym here locally on the Coast Road that I know a mixed martial arts gym. Again, he stayed open. Now there are exceptions in that regulations they brought out, which we use. Now, we don't like to use exceptions. Why should we? There are other ways around that problem. A contractual way would be a PMA, for example, is another way that actually Kevin did in Wigan to get round it. So there are other ways, PMAs, but you see the people who come to your door, they're not educated in these matters. They're told by policy, go and do this. Now, the exceptions are like training, filming, education. You can stay open. All these things have been tried, but you're quite right. You've got to make it personal, though. That risk assessment, that guy who comes to the front door, that's a different category. You've got to go above their heads. And this is what I'm saying with a community group. If you've got knowledge like this in a community group, you just pick up the phone and they know someone. Oh, they're trying to do this. Yeah, we are a PMA. What can you help us? So it avoids any intimidation, any potential conflict in society, which we're trying to avoid. People can avoid it sensibly, and there's no ego there. Yeah, we can do that. Don't worry about it. That's the idea. So I believe it would work. But also having this knowledge, if you've engaged and made a relationship with people that we put into power, you can actually protect them and say, look, I know a bit about this. Don't do that or if you're going to do that, do this. Why? It's because of you breaching legislation. I don't want to see you lose your career. I like what you do. You're helping people. You're doing this. We're trying to help you. So stay clear of that. We had somebody an MP actually resigned from a certain position recently, which I'm not going to say the name. I'm not going to say what it was, but he didn't believe in the narrative that was being driven. A very sensitive issue. But you see, the community group could actually help people, educate people in this legislation, in everything.
And I think if you're using the term, which is obviously, like I said, that there was the Conservative government when they were in power, they had launched this, legislation where you could create the Community Care Association. That to me is going to have a much greater effect. Well, look, we're caring for the community rather than, like some kind of because it always ends up being too, well, a lot of times I should say, not always, but a lot of times it ends up being too aggressive if you're doing it like, just in an unorganized group, or it's a kind of a protest. And you're never going to get anywhere if you're just doing it just on your own, just you and a clipboard. You're just going to get, completely rolled over. So I do think that the community care thing, using the legislation, using the knowledge of all of their own acts, I think that is you kind of joining their side.
Yes.
In a way. And you could, I think you said it the other day as well, was like giving them helpful advice. Just be careful if you're going to do that, because if you step out of, your risk assessment there, that could actually be seen as a criminal offence. And I don't want you to get into deep water for that.
Yes, it's true. But there are many tactics, and it is tactics. It's the knowledge is no use without the tactics. It's great to have. It removes the fear. Knowledge takes away the ignorance, takes away the fear. But the strategy is how we need to look at it. For example, you always have to imagine what you're doing could go to court. You want to go to court to resolve it. They don't want you to go to court or tribunal. So how do you win without getting there? So that you have to fabricate, can I use the word fabricate, a case of evidence, collect evidence. If you've got someone who's really confrontational with you, what you first try to do is interact. It's not, the only way you're going to win is not being adversarial. The opposites, right and left, up and down, the opposites are two extremes. You will never bring them together. So the way you do it is engage, interact, and influence. So you try. I've got a case now with somebody where I knew the outcome and she knew the outcome. She would get dismissed no matter what. And it's the same with other teachers, shall we say. They have been selected. They know after 20 years, 10 years, 30 years, they know they're not wanted for a certain reason. So how do you win that? Well, they're going to get dismissed. They know it themselves. So we have to win certain objectives, and you have to build a case up to win it, a legal case. Certain evidence you have to build up to put pressure on people to have an influence. If you try all the routes to resolve a matter, and I'm talking about a community care group, you offer mediation, for example. That's very, very good. If you go to court, look, we try to mediate, but they won't have it. We try to ask their options, what they would think to resolve it, but they won't have it. But here we are. What else can we do? So there's a lot of process in this to achieve an objective. Let's go back to the community care associations. I think that's important. I'll be down in Leeds and actually helping people set up one there in a few weeks. And it's important. Maybe, Peter, you can tell me how you've seen the importance of a community care group, because I think you've got a good handle on this now.
Well, what I would like to see if I could get, I'd like to be involved in it, but I'd like to have other people that are already more influential in the local, because I'm just looking at my local council, and I'd like to tell them all about it and get them educated up on it, because I know what they do, and it's more than likely not talking about the legislation you've mentioned. And if they had that kind of a little bit of education from myself or whatever, like what you've passed on to me, and then be able to get them to help create a community care association, because they've already been involved and have got a well-known name, then give them sort of the little bit of nudge to go in on talking to people on a more calmer level. I'm not saying they're aggressive, but they're certainly passionate about what they do. So, but if you gave them sort of a little bit of a hint, that's what I would like to do, is create a community care association for my local council, and also be able to use it as a model if any inquiries ever came in, say, well, look, this is what, you have done, this is what Warren's done down in Leeds or down in Llandudno, and this is what we've done up in the northeast, and we're having an influence on the local council, and we have been able to assist in, and you're going to get people that you could actually, in some ways, you could get an inside relationship with the council where you could influence, and eventually you could end up being very influential with all of the councillors, or at least some important councillors that could actually get the correct decisions made when it comes down to the things like where are they going to place a 5G tower, or where are they going to block a road off that's going to affect everyone to stop them traveling down certain routes that everyone's been used to, and that type of thing. So again, I want to be using it not as an offensive tool, but that could actually stop things that could be detrimental to the community.
Yes.
So not being aggressive with it, not being, using it as an offensive tool or anything like that, but being literally a stop point. Well, you can't go any further than this because you're actually breaking legislation.
Yes,
that's what I want to do.
And the ultimate, if you feel that you're not having an effect on a particular councillor, there are rules where you can deselect them. So you can make them stand down. You can deselect councillors for not doing their job, not responding to the community. Now, if you've got a big enough community care group, you may have a domestic one as well as a business one. And that councillor is not, because that's what they're there for, to benefit the community, business and domestics. If they're not doing it, they're not complying with the code of conduct, their statutory obligation, there are processes where you can say, well, we will deselect you. And you can do it very quickly. I'll give you an example. My brother, many years ago, he didn't like the head of the local Conservative Party in North Wales, and he studied the rule book, and he just went through the rule book. Within 3 weeks, he ousted the head of the Young Conservative Party. This is when he was in his 20s, of course, but he changed the direction of the local Conservative Party. Okay, so you can do this with councils if you want. They need to work together. They need to be compassionate. What they're doing has got to be listening to the community. I saw on Wednesday, we had a meeting in Harden. There were 30 people there. I spoke there. We have 50 people sometime turn up. And there was a guy there, probably in his 80s. He was worried stiff. They don't know what to do. Young people were there. What do we do? What do we do? And they're so ingrained in what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And trying to get this message through to them, you can't, it doesn't work one time because I don't know why, but you have to. It's a Kellogg's cornflake advert approach. You have to do it a few times in different ways. But I'm willing to do it, even though you and we try these methods and we find that sometimes we get frustrated in trying it and we're not getting through. But even if only one person answers us and say, I want to do it, I like to help, I like to be involved, form a community care, I'm with you. 100% I will support you, you know.
Definitely. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. I mean, we're definitely going to need to talk more about it, I think, again in the future. But we'll call it a day there. So if like anybody needed to get in touch with you or wanted to know more about the community care association that you're doing, what can they actually do?
Well, a few things. Go on Facebook, look for London No Community Care Association. That's one thing. Study that. You'll see the progress of what I've just been telling you about. Look at the link that takes you to a MailChimp webpage, which is free. That's how it started. Facebook free, MailChimp. If you're going to do it, don't write any text which is going to cause problems. You know what I mean? It's going to be humble text with concern. Just follow the text I've used. Second thing, go to harmonyunion.org. harmonyunion.org. That's the union I set up now after the Workers of Wales union. My email address, maybe you can put on here, Peter. I'll say it for you now. It's Jurajet, 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 like the whiskey, a jet engine, at yahoo.com. And incidentally, I wanted to mention something about a major topic very briefly, is food resources. People are very worried about food resources, good food. We have developed a website. I did this a few years ago, and an app. The website is there. It's called wellbeingfinder.co.uk. And that will be top-ended by an app that looks like a radar screen. So no matter what product services you're looking for, within 1 mile, you can put the slider on, 2 miles, 3 miles, and it will give you where these people are. Farmers, for example, doing organic food, and you get the details. And these are the people who can't get the food to the supermarkets for many reasons. But these are the people who will not stop you trading with them. Okay. It's in its early days. The food ones, some of those are populated, but chiropodists or GPs who want to join in, they're all on there. Or they will be. Thank you, Peter, for the opportunity. Go on, sorry.
So what was that last one then? I'll make sure I put all the links in the description. Wellbeing Finder?
Yes, wellbeingfinder.co.uk.
Right.
It'd be another 6 weeks, we'll have the app complete, and that will front end the website. You just go on. For farmers and people who've got products and services for free. For everybody else, it'd be £10 a year. And if you can't afford £10 a year, come to me, I'll give it you to free. Okay?
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for all of that information and all your time. And we'll make sure the links are in the description for anyone that wants to get a hold of you. And again, just thank you so much for everything that you do for all of the communities.
Peter, I'd like to thank you for all your energy and effort, and that's why you have to go training, so you have the energy to do this. I know how you feel.